"Get off this property before I call security," the young officer snapped, spotting the old man pushing his lawnmower near the barracks gate. The elderly man said nothing, just bowed his head and continued working. 1 hour later, a military SUV pulled up sharply beside him. The door opened. A colonel stepped out, stood at attention, and saluted him as everyone watched in stunned silence. Do you wonder who this old groundskeeper really was? If you respect silent heroes, type honor in the comments. Jack Mallory was a 78-year-old veteran who had served 2 tours in Vietnam and 1 special training assignment stateside. His weathered face carried the quiet dignity of a man who had seen more than he would ever share. After retiring from active duty, he lived alone in a modest house near his old training barracks, where he had once been an instructor who shaped raw recruits into soldiers. The memories of those days kept him anchored to a place that had long since forgotten him. Jack refused special benefits, supporting himself by mowing lawns, primarily around military facilities. It wasn't about the meager income. It was about staying close to the morning bugle calls and the rhythmic cadence of marching that had structured his life for decades. Each morning, he meticulously cleaned his aging lawnmower, donned his faded canvas hat, and set out to work. His hands might tremble slightly with age, but his steps remained purposeful and steady. A soldier's gait that never quite leaves those who've earned it. No one recognized him anymore. To the current generation of military personnel, he was just another elderly handyman, invisible except when needed. One particularly hot day, while trimming grass near the newly constructed barracks gate, a young lieutenant intercepted him. "This area is off-limits to civilians. You're not permitted to be here." Jack offered a patient smile. "I cleared it with the civilian office outside the gate. I'll just finish this row and be on my way." The lieutenant frowned. "Rules are rules. Leave now, or I'll call security." Jack didn't argue. He simply turned away and continued pushing his mower, only to be dismissed with casual indifference by the younger officer. A group of recruits lounging nearby snickered, calling him the wandering old man who thinks he's military. Their laughter carried across the recently cut grass that Jack had been maintaining without recognition for over 15 years. He heard them, of course. After decades in combat zones, his hearing remained surprisingly sharp, but he said nothing. The military had taught him that sometimes silence was the most dignified response. As the sun climbed higher, Jack wiped sweat from his brow and continued his work. He wasn't there for appreciation or recognition. He was there because this place, these grounds, this institution, had given his life meaning when he needed it most. And if maintaining its appearance was all he could still offer, then that's what he would do, with or without anyone's approval. By midday, Jack paused to drink from an old plastic water bottle, his shirt soaked with sweat from hours of pushing the heavy mower under the relentless sun. A civilian administrator approached, chin raised with authority. "Who authorized you to touch the barracks lawn?" Jack tried explaining, "I used to serve here. I just want to keep the grounds looking proper. Free of charge." The administrator dismissed him. "Please don't use veteran status to exploit sympathy." A cluster of new recruits chuckled by the training facility, not one standing up for the old man. At that moment, a training officer walked by, noticed the scene, glanced briefly at Jack, then continued walking without a word. Not a single person, among hundreds Jack had once trained, recognized the man who had prepared them for battle, and for many ensured their survival through his meticulous instruction. Jack nodded, collected his tools, and prepared to leave. But a young recruit, newly enlisted, watched him intently. This soldier didn't laugh with the others. Instead, he studied Jack's stance. His eyes, something about the old man, stirred a profound emotion in the young recruit's heart. The recruit, Private Michael Torres, had grown up hearing stories from his grandfather, also a Vietnam veteran, about a sergeant who had taught them to stay alive when bullets flew. The way Jack carried himself, even while being humiliated, sparked a distant memory of his grandfather's descriptions. Jack started his final pass with the mower before leaving when Torres approached the civilian administrator. "Sir, do you know who that man is?" he asked. "Just some local handyman," came the dismissive reply. Torres hesitated, then walked toward his commanding officer, speaking quietly. The officer shook his head, seemingly uninterested in the young recruit's concerns. By now, Jack had nearly reached the gate, dignity intact but spirit wounded. For years, he had maintained these grounds not for payment, but out of devotion to what they represented, the continuation of service, discipline, and honor that had defined his life. As he prepared to load his equipment into his rusted pickup truck, Torres made a decision. He pulled out his phone and searched military records, finding an old training photo. Then he made a call to his grandfather, who confirmed his suspicions with a single name, Sergeant Mallory. The young recruit immediately contacted the base commander's office, speaking urgently to the administrative assistant. 20 minutes later, as Jack was securing his mower in the truck bed, a voice called out, "Sergeant Mallory? Is that really you, sir?" I read this far and my heart ached. A man who once served his country, now turned away from the very place he once protected. If you feel this injustice deserves to be spoken about, type honor in the comments. Late that afternoon, a polished black military SUV pulled up precisely where Jack was gathering his equipment. The door opened. A man in formal military dress uniform stepped out, the insignia of a colonel prominent on his shoulders. No one understood what was happening until the colonel walked directly to Jack and rendered a formal salute. "Sir, permission to greet you properly, Sergeant Jack Mallory, the man who trained my squad at Fort Carson in 1984. The entire barracks area fell silent. A young officer standing nearby, the same who had ordered Jack to leave that morning, stood stunned, mouth slightly open in disbelief. This man once preserved the lives of more than 30 young soldiers, including mine, the colonel stated clearly for all to hear. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here with these insignia. Jack remained quiet. He simply smiled, nodded slightly, and tried to turn away. But the colonel called him back. "Sergeant, you're the reason I became a true soldier. Today, on behalf of the military, I thank you for never seeking recognition." Several young soldiers approached, removing their caps, bowing their heads in respectful silence. No words were exchanged, but every pair of eyes had transformed, from indifference to gratitude, from contempt to reverence. The Colonel, David Mercer, had been a scared 19-year-old when he first met Sergeant Mallory. Now, 38 years later, he commanded hundreds of men and women, implementing training methods he had learned under Jack's tutelage. "Sergeant Mallory once told us something I've never forgotten," Colonel Mercer announced to the gathered crowd. He said, "A soldier's greatest weapon isn't in his hands, it's in his heart. Courage can't be issued, it must be found within." The lieutenant who had dismissed Jack earlier stepped forward, his face flushed with shame. "Sir, I had no idea." Jack interrupted him gently. "No apology needed, son. You were doing your job. Security matters." This simple act, forgiving the very person who had humiliated him, demonstrated more about Jack's character than any medal or commendation ever could. Colonel Mercer turned to address the entire company. "From this day forward, Sergeant Mallory has permanent access to these grounds. Moreover, I'm establishing the Mallory Excellence in Training Award for instructors who exemplify his dedication." The base commander, alerted by Private Torres's call, arrived to personally shake Jack's hand. "We've lost touch with our history," he admitted. "You are a living connection to the principles that built this institution." As the day drew to a close, Jack stood straighter than he had in years, not from the recognition, but from the knowledge that the values he had tried to instill, discipline, respect, and service beyond self, remained alive in at least some of those he had trained. The simple act of mowing lawns had been his way of continuing to serve, to maintain standards, to remain connected to the brotherhood that had defined his existence. And now that brotherhood had finally remembered him. As Jack pushed his mower away from the grounds, one recruit stepped forward, standing at attention in salute. Then a second, a third. One by one, young soldiers stood, hands over hearts, eyes fixed on the old man. Without any command, the entire barracks formation stood in unified respect. A small gesture, but the greatest honor a veteran could receive. Colonel Mercer placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, saying quietly, "Sir, this barracks will always be yours." Jack smiled, tears gathering in his eyes, then quietly departed, in the most respectful silence a soldier could ever experience. The following week, when Jack arrived with his mower, he found a new nameplate on the barracks gate, Mallory Training Grounds. Inside, a framed photograph now hung in the entrance hall, a young Sergeant Mallory instructing recruits in 1975. Beneath it, a simple inscription, "Service continues long after the uniform is put away." Private Torres, who had recognized Jack's bearing and made the crucial phone call, was selected to document Jack's stories for the base archives, preserving the wisdom of a generation nearly forgotten. Some people spend their entire lives never asking for gratitude, but we, the rest of us, owe them eternal respect. Subscribe to TT Hero Stories if you believe kindness and honor should be protected to the very end. TT Hero Stories, because some heroes never stop serving.